The dust whirled in angry spirals across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory as Yancey Mitchell squinted against the setting sun, his weathered face revealing the hard years of ranch life since the end of the Civil War. It was 1878, and the 30-year-old cowboy had spent more than a decade driving cattle, fighting outlaws, and surviving the unforgiving frontier that had claimed many men with less resolve. This evening was supposed to be like any other returning to his modest homestead after delivering cattle to the growing settlement of Whispering Creek, but fate had other plans. Yancey dismounted his chestnut mare, stretching his aching back as he approached the small creek to refill his canteen. The sound was so faint he almost missed it, a rustle in the brush followed by what could have been a whimper. His hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver on his hip. "Who's there?" he called, his voice carrying across the open terrain. "Show yourself." The silence stretched for several heartbeats before the brush parted, revealing a small figure. A boy, no more than 8 or 9 years old, stood before him. His clothes were tattered, face smudged with dirt, and eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperation. "I ain't gonna hurt you, boy," Yancey said, lowering his weapon. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The child's lips trembled, and he swayed slightly on his feet. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I'm hungry." Something shifted in Yancey's chest, a feeling he'd long buried beneath years of solitude. He looked at the boy's gaunt face and hollowed cheeks and made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives forever. "You'll never starve again," he promised, reaching into his saddlebag for jerky and hardtack. "Not while I'm around." The boy devoured the food with such ferocity that Yancey had to caution him to slow down. As the child's desperate hunger subsided, Yancey learned his name was Caleb. His parents had died of fever 2 weeks prior, and the boy had been wandering ever since, after neighbors had threatened to send him to an orphanage in Cheyenne. "I got a small place about an hour's ride from here," Yancey offered. "You can stay there tonight, get cleaned up." "We'll figure out what to do come morning," Caleb nodded, eyeing Yancey with cautious hope. What was meant to be temporary shelter for one night extended to a week, then a month. Yancey had never considered himself father material, but something about the quiet, resilient boy struck a chord within him. By summer's end, Yancey had filed papers in town to become Caleb's legal guardian. Life settled into a rhythm for the unlikely pair. Yancey taught Caleb about ranch work, how to ride, and how to survive in the harsh but beautiful land they called home. The boy proved a quick study, eager to please and grateful for the security he'd found. The loneliness that had been Yancey's constant companion for years slowly dissipated as laughter and conversation filled his small cabin. 18 months after finding Caleb, Yancey rode into Whispering Creek for supplies with the boy perched behind him on the saddle. The settlement had grown considerably, with new businesses sprouting along its main street, including a schoolhouse that had opened the previous autumn. "You should be getting book learning," Yancey remarked as they tied up the horse outside the general store. "More to life than just cows and horses," Caleb frowned. "I don't want to leave you alone at the ranch." "I managed before you came along," Yancey reminded him with a gentle smile. "Besides, it's just during the day, you'd be home every night." Inside the store, they found themselves in the midst of a commotion. A woman was arguing with the shopkeeper, her voice firm but controlled. "Mr. Simmons, I've explained this 3 times now. These books were promised for the school 2 months ago. I have 28 children who need them." The shopkeeper sighed. "Miss Caldwell, I understand your frustration, but the freight wagons run when they run. There's nothing I can do about it." "Penny Caldwell," someone whispered nearby. "The new schoolteacher from Boston, been here since September." Yancey found himself unable to look away from her. She stood straight-backed and determined, her chestnut hair pulled into a practical bun, though a few rebellious strands framed a face that combined intelligence with unmistakable beauty. She couldn't have been more than 25, and her Eastern clothing, though modest, stood out amidst the practical frontier garments of the townswomen. When she turned, apparently feeling his gaze, Yancey quickly busied himself examining a shelf of canned goods. Caleb, however, had no such reservations. "Are you really a teacher, madam?" the boy asked, stepping forward. Penny Caldwell's expression softened as she looked down at him. "I am indeed, and who might you be?" "Caleb, madam, Caleb Mitchell now," he added with pride, glancing back at Yancey. "Do you teach reading? I can read some, but not real good yet." "Not very well," she corrected gently. "And yes, reading is perhaps my favorite subject to teach." Her eyes moved to Yancey, a question in them. "Yancey Mitchell, madam," he said, removing his hat, "the boy's guardian." "Your son is of school age, Mr. Mitchell," she observed. "We would welcome him at Whispering Creek School." "He ain't," Yancey began, then corrected himself. "He's not my son by birth. I took him in last year when he was orphaned." Something shifted in her expression, approval, perhaps, or respect. "That speaks well of your character, Mr. Mitchell. The offer stands. We have several children who ride in from outlying homesteads." Before Yancey could respond, Caleb was already bouncing with excitement. "Can I go, Yancey?" "Please?" And so it was decided. 3 days later, Yancey delivered Caleb to the schoolhouse, having spent their savings on proper clothes, books, and supplies. Miss Caldwell greeted them at the door, her smile warm as she welcomed Caleb inside. "He's had a hard go of it," Yancey said quietly as Caleb joined the other children. "Found him half-starved in the brush near Cottonwood Creek, smart as a whip, though." "Children are remarkably resilient, Mr. Mitchell," she replied. "What you've done for him is commendable." Yancey shuffled uncomfortably under her praise. "Just did what anyone would." "We both know that's not true," she countered, her direct gaze unnerving him. "Not everyone chooses kindness, especially out here." In the weeks that followed, Yancey found increasingly flimsy reasons to visit town. He'd volunteer to deliver firewood to the schoolhouse, offer to repair broken furniture, or simply appear at day's end to escort Caleb home, despite the boy being perfectly capable of making the journey on his well-trained pony. Penny Caldwell was unlike any woman he'd encountered. Educated and refined, yet unafraid of the frontier's challenges. She maintained order among children of all ages with a gentle but firm hand, taught with genuine passion, and seemed to truly see Caleb's potential in a way that made Yancey's chest swell with pride. Winter arrived with brutal force that year. A blizzard howled across the territory in late November, leaving drifts taller than a man in some places. When the storm cleared, Yancey fought his way into town, worried about those who might be stranded. He found Miss Caldwell at the schoolhouse, which had become a temporary shelter for several families unable to reach their homes when the storm hit. She was organizing bedding, her sleeves rolled up as she worked tirelessly to ensure everyone's comfort. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "How did you manage to get through?" "Stubbornness," he replied with a hint of a smile. "Came to see if help was needed. We're managing, but another pair of hands would be welcome. Some of the men are trying to clear paths to the homes closest to town." They worked side by side through the day, and Yancey saw yet another dimension of the woman who had increasingly occupied his thoughts. She was tireless, practical, and genuinely concerned for those in her care. As evening fell, they found themselves alone for a moment near the wood stove. "Caleb speaks of you constantly," she said softly. "You've given him more than just food and shelter, Mr. Mitchell. You've given him security, purpose." Yancey stared into the flames. "Truth is, he's given me just as much. Never knew how empty that cabin was until he filled it with his chatter." "And yet there's still something missing, isn't there?" she asked perceptively. He looked up, caught off guard by her insight. "Maybe so. I understand. I left Boston seeking adventure, purpose beyond the drawing rooms and social obligations that awaited me there. I've found meaningful work here, but sometimes the evenings are quiet." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. The moment was broken when several townspeople entered, bringing news that the paths were cleared. The following Sunday, Yancey did something he hadn't done in years. He attended church services in town. He told himself it was for Caleb's benefit, but his eyes sought out Penny immediately upon entering the small clapboard building. After the service, he approached her, hat in hand. "Miss Caldwell, I was wondering if you might join Caleb and me for dinner some evening." "Nothing fancy, mind you, just a meal at our place." Her smile lit something within him. "I would be delighted, Mr. Mitchell." Penny's first visit to their homestead revealed the care Yancey had taken to make it a proper home. The cabin was clean, modestly furnished, but comfortable. A bookshelf held Caleb's growing collection, and evidence of their shared life was everywhere, from the boys' drawings tacked to the wall to the two rocking chairs before the hearth. Caleb proudly showed her his pony and the small garden plot he tended. Yancey had prepared a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, biscuits, and apple pie purchased from the town bakery. The conversation flowed easily, filled with Caleb's enthusiastic accounts of school projects and Penny's amusing stories of adjustment to frontier life. As Caleb excused himself to finish a reading assignment, Yancey and Penny stepped outside into the cool evening air. "You've built something beautiful here," she said, gazing across the land that stretched toward distant mountains. "It's not much compared to what you must be used to in Boston." "You misunderstand me," she said, turning to face him. "I don't mean the land or the cabin, though both are lovely. I mean what you've created with Caleb, a family forged by choice rather than obligation. That's truly beautiful." Yancey found himself moving closer to her, drawn by something he couldn't name. "Penny, Miss Caldwell, I'm not a man of many words, but I'd like to see more of you if you're agreeable." Her eyes, reflecting the deepening twilight, met his. "I am very agreeable, Mr. Mitchell." Very agreeable indeed. Through that winter, their courtship progressed with proper decorum but unmistakable intent. Yancey would bring Penny wildflowers that somehow survived in sheltered spots, while she would send Caleb home with books she thought Yancey might enjoy. They attended town socials together, shared Sunday dinners, and slowly revealed their histories to each other. Yancey spoke of his years fighting for the Union, the family farm in Ohio he'd left behind, and his journey west seeking something he couldn't articulate. Penny confided her frustration with Boston society's limitations for women, her passion for education, and her decision to answer the advertisement for a frontier teacher despite her family's horror. By spring, the entire settlement of Whispering Creek had silently acknowledged their attachment. Women nodded approvingly when Penny passed, while men clapped Yancey on the shoulder at the saloon, though he rarely indulged in more than a single drink these days. It was Caleb, however, who finally forced the issue one evening as they sat before the fire, Penny having joined them for supper once again. "Yancey," the boy said thoughtfully, "if you married Miss Caldwell, would she be my mother?" Yancey choked on his coffee while Penny's cheeks flushed crimson. "Caleb," Yancey sputtered. "That's not, you can't just, it's a reasonable question," Penny interjected, her voice steady despite her blush. "And yes, Caleb, if such an event were to occur, I would consider it my privilege to be regarded as your mother, though I would never presume to replace the one you lost." Caleb nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because I think Yancey is lonely when I'm at school, and you make him smile like nobody else does." That night, after Caleb had gone to bed and Yancey was walking Penny to her horse, he finally found the courage that had served him in battles but abandoned him in matters of the heart. "He's right, you know," Yancey said quietly. "About the smiling, about all of it." Penny stopped, turning to face him in the silver moonlight. "Is he? I never expected to find someone like you out here. Never thought I'd find anyone at all, truth be told." But from that first day in the store, something changed. He took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I don't have much to offer beyond this land, this life. It's not an easy one." "I didn't come west seeking ease, Yancey," she replied. "I came seeking purpose, meaning. I've found both in my school, in this community." Her free hand reached up to touch his weathered cheek. "And in you and Caleb." He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but she met him halfway. Their first kiss was tentative, sweet with promise and restrained passion. When they parted, Yancey knew with bone-deep certainty that his life had irrevocably changed course once again. "I'm not asking right now," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I do, I want to do it proper, but I will be asking Penny Caldwell." Her smile was radiant in the moonlight. "And when you do, Yancey Mitchell, I suspect my answer will make us both very happy." Their courtship continued through spring planting and into the early summer. Yancey worked tirelessly, not only tending his growing herd, but also adding 2 rooms to the cabin, a proper bedroom for Caleb and another he didn't explicitly discuss. Penny helped where she could during her visits, planting flowering vines near the porch and bringing curtains she'd sewn from fabric ordered from Cheyenne. In late June, disaster struck. A band of cattle rustlers hit several ranches in the area, including Yancey's. He lost nearly half his herd, a devastating blow that represented years of careful breeding and investment. Yancey returned from tracking the rustlers empty-handed and soul-weary. Penny found him sitting on his porch steps, staring blankly at the horizon. "Caleb told me what happened," she said, settling beside him. "I'm so sorry, Yancey." "Everything I've built worked," for his voice caught. "I was going to sell some of those cattle in autumn, had plans." She placed her hand over his. "What plans?" He finally looked at her, anguish evident in his eyes. "Was going to ask you properly, with a ring worthy of you, wanted to be sure I could provide." "Oh, Yancey," she squeezed his hand. "Do you think I care about cattle or rings? It's you I want a future with, not your possessions." "A man should be able to take care of his family. And you will, we will together. This is a setback, not an ending." The community rallied around those affected by the rustlers. Neighboring ranchers contributed calves to help rebuild herds. The town organized a hunting party that brought down enough game to see families through while they recovered. And through it all, Penny stood firmly at Yancey's side. By August, though the loss still stung, Yancey had begun to recover both financially and spiritually. On a warm evening, he asked Penny to ride with him to a hilltop overlooking the valley where his remaining cattle grazed. "I've been thinking," he said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in magnificent oranges and pinks, "about what you said, about building a future together." "And what conclusions have you reached?" she asked, her eyes reflecting the golden light. He reached into his pocket, producing a small wooden box. "That I'm a fool if I wait one more day to ask you to be my wife." Inside the box was a ring, not the expensive one he'd originally planned, but a beautifully crafted silver band set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Had my brother send it from Ohio. It's not fancy, it's perfect," she interrupted, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Absolutely perfect. Penny Caldwell, will you marry me? Will you help me raise Caleb, build this ranch, grow old beside me?" "Yes," she whispered, then laughed with pure joy. "Yes to all of it, Yancey. Every single part." They were married in September in Whispering Creek's church, with Caleb standing proudly at Yancey's side. The entire settlement turned out for the celebration that followed, a testament to how deeply both had become woven into the community's fabric. That night, after Caleb had finally fallen asleep in his new room, Yancey and Penny stood on the porch of what was now their shared home. "I never thought I'd find this," Yancey confessed, his arm around his wife's waist. "After the war, I just wanted solitude, peace, never imagined a family." "Life has a way of giving us what we need, even when it's not what we thought we wanted," Penny replied, leaning into his embrace. "When I left Boston, my mother predicted I'd be back within 6 months, unable to endure the primitive conditions." Yancey chuckled. "And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else with anyone else." She turned in his arms, reaching up to trace the lines of his face. "This is where I belong, Yancey, with you and Caleb." Their life together wasn't without challenges. The following winter was particularly harsh, and spring brought flooding that damaged part of their land. Penny continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning each afternoon. though she reduced her schedule when she discovered she was expecting a child the following year. Their daughter, Emma, was born on a cool April morning in 1881, with the assistance of the town doctor and 2 neighboring women. Caleb, now 11, peered at his baby sister with awe, solemnly promising Yancey he would always protect her. "Just like you protected me," the boy said, his voice carrying the first hints of approaching manhood. Yancey had to turn away to hide the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. In that moment, surrounded by his family, the one he'd created through chance, choice, and love, he remembered the starving, desperate child he'd found by the creek 3 years earlier. He remembered his own words, "You'll never starve again." He hadn't just meant food. Somehow, he'd known even then that they would fill each other's emptiness, satisfy the hunger for connection that had gnawed at them both. By Emma's first birthday, the ranch was thriving again. Yancey had diversified, adding horses to his cattle operation and planting more extensive crops. Penny had trained another teacher to share her duties, allowing her more time at home while still maintaining her beloved school connection. Caleb grew into a thoughtful, hard-working young man, excelling in his studies while developing into a skilled rancher under Yancey's guidance. His unique position, neither fully son nor merely ward, evolved into something special, a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection that transcended traditional labels. In the autumn of 1885, 7 years after Yancey had found a starving boy by the creek, the Mitchell family gathered on their porch to watch a spectacular sunset. Emma, now 4, sat on her father's lap, while Penny leaned against his shoulder. Caleb, 15 and nearly as tall as Yancey, stood nearby whittling a piece of wood. "What are you making there, son?" Yancey asked. Caleb looked up, a smile crossing his increasingly mature features. "A sign for the ranch entrance." He held up the partially completed carving, "Mitchell Family Ranch ESD, 1878. "That's the year you found me," Caleb explained, seeing Yancey's questioning look. "Seemed right to count from then." Penny squeezed Yancey's hand as emotion threatened to overcome him again, something that happened with embarrassing frequency these days. "It's perfect," she said when Yancey couldn't find his voice. "That's exactly when this family began." Later that night, with the children asleep, Yancey and Penny lay in their bed, her head resting on his chest as he stroked her hair, now streaked with a few strands of silver. "You ever wonder how differently things might have turned out?" she asked softly. "If you hadn't found Caleb that day, or if I'd chosen some other frontier town." "Used to," he admitted. "Not anymore. Some things just feel meant, like all the pieces were scattered about, waiting to come together just right." She propped herself up to look at him, her face softened by the years but still as beautiful to him as that first day in the general store. "Who would have thought a hungry orphan boy would lead to all this?" "Providence works in mysterious ways, Mrs. Mitchell," he said, pulling her close. "I'm just grateful it worked in our favor." Outside their window, the vast Wyoming sky glittered with stars, the same stars that had witnessed a starving boy's desperation and a lonely cowboy's compassion 7 years earlier. The same stars that would watch over the Mitchell Ranch for generations, to come a legacy born from a simple act of kindness on a dusty trail, and the promise, "You'll never starve again." In the spring of 1888, as their 10th anniversary approached, Yancey and Penny stood together watching Caleb graduate from the school where they had first truly met. At 18, he was preparing to attend college in Denver, an opportunity made possible by years of careful saving and his own diligent study. "Are you sure about this, Yancey?" Caleb asked that evening as they discussed the finances once more. "It's a lot of money." "More certain than I've been about most things," Yancey replied firmly. "You've got a mind meant for more than just cattle, always have." "I'll come back," Caleb promised. "This is home." Emma, now 7 and every bit as spirited as her mother, tugged at her brother's sleeve. "You have to come back. You promised to teach me to shoot when I'm older, and Papa says he won't." Penny gave her husband a knowing look over their daughter's head. Both knew Yancey would eventually relent on that particular matter. He denied Emma very little. That night, after the children were asleep, Yancey and Penny walked hand in hand under the stars, as had become their custom. "Did you ever imagine this?" Penny asked, gesturing toward their home, now a proper ranch house with glass windows and a stone chimney. "When you found that starving boy?" Yancey considered the question seriously. "Never, not any of it, was just trying to do the decent thing." He squeezed her hand. "Turned out to be the best decision I ever made." "Second best," she corrected with a smile. "Oh, asking me to marry you, that was your best decision." He laughed, pulling her close against the evening chill. "Can't argue with that, Mrs. Mitchell. Can't argue with that at all." The years had not been without sorrow. They had lost a baby between Emma and their youngest, Robert, born when Penny was 38. Droughts had threatened their livelihood more than once. But through it all, the foundation remained solid, a family built on an improbable meeting and a promise kept. As they walked back toward the warmth of their home, Yancey reflected on the hungry child who had changed the course of his solitary existence, and the remarkable woman who had completed the transformation. From emptiness had come fullness, from chance purpose, from a simple act of compassion, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. The lights of their home beckoned across the prairie, a beacon of what was possible when hunger of all kinds was finally, completely satisfied.